Me and a friend felt like we were supposed to go on a 2-week visit into Iran, and had a great time, and fell in love with the country, fell in love with the people. While we were leaving the country, it was crossing the border. We hand in our documents to be stamped out of the country, and we didn't get them back. And it was about 6 hours later that they finally came back to us and said, "There's a problem with your documents." And the reality is that I had dealt with before I went, like, what if you have a problem? What if there could be complications being an American? Yeah, it all came to the surface. And I realized, wow, I could really have a problem. Like, this is for real. And yeah, in my walk with the Lord and in many dangerous places, I've always seen God come through. And all of a sudden, the thought hit me, well, what if this is different? They separated me and my friend, took me into another room, and there they beat me for about 6 hours, kicking me and hitting me. After those 6 hours, they dragged me back down to the lobby where I met my friend again, who had been beaten in another room. They put us in prison clothes, and they blindfolded us again, and then they led us down this basement, and they put me into one prison cell and my friend into another one. And there I was in prison in Iran. It was out of my hands. There was nothing I could do. Either God would do a miracle or I would stay there. There was no sense of feeling God. I felt like God was far away. All I could really trust in was his character, and that his character would be true no matter what I was feeling and no matter what circumstance I was going through. They put me in a cell in isolation, had a light in one corner, and that was on 24 hours a day. It was in the winter time. There was actually snow outside, but the heater didn't work well. They only let me out of the room to be interrogated, which was once a day or sometimes not at all. And then they would lead me down this hallway and take me into the interrogation room, which was an ugly room. It had blood stains on the floor, very dark and murky. It was definitely the most terrifying part of the whole experience. The beatings would start, and it would be slapping in the face, hitting in the stomach, sometimes kicking. I struggled with faith. Was God with me? Did he love me? If God's good, why would he allow me through the situation? And I remember one day I woke up and I was done, inside. And I remember waking up that day thinking to myself, if I'm gonna be here the rest of my life, why not check out? My only thought was not to stay there. And the only way not to stay there was to die. I stuck my head in the sink, I filled it up, and tied one end to a bracket, put it over my head, and then hopefully would tie the other end tight, thinking that, with my head in the water, in a few minutes I'd be gone. 4 times I tried to kill myself, but every time I tried, I was too scared to tie the other end. And I'll never forget the last time. Again, I tried. Again, I was like, come on, do it. And again, I just couldn't do it. I couldn't tie it tight. And I remember at that moment jerking my head out of the water. And if I was ever aware of my brokenness, I was aware of it at that moment. And I remember falling down on the ground, and I was broken. And if I was ever aware of my shame, I was aware of my shame at that moment. And I remember lying down on the ground in that moment, all of a sudden the room fills with this glorious light. And I turn around to see what's going on, and there is Jesus. And he's standing in front of me with this big grin and smile on his face. And it was at that lowest point that he met me. And he looks at me and he stretches out his hands and he puts them underneath me like this. And in the vision, as I see Jesus, he looks at me and says this. He says, Dan, I love you, and I promise to carry you through this time. And from that day until this day, I've never had those thoughts again. And that's who Jesus is. He meets us at our lowest, and he can rescue us from the depths of us, and he wants to give us life in the midst of the pain of life. God began to challenge me with his love for our enemies. And he said this, he's like, Dan, ask me what I think about this man. And he asked me the question about the man who was my interrogator, the man who beat me, the man who seemed to hate me the most. And it was a few days into it that I finally asked God, okay, yeah, what do you think of this man? And at that moment, yeah, my heart opened up and I began to see God's love for this man. How he loved him from the beginning, how he made him, how he loved his family. And I'll never forget the last day I saw him. I remember on this day thinking, oh my gosh, what's he gonna do today? And at that moment, I remember looking at him and I said this. I said, sir, if I'm gonna see you the rest of my life, every day, why don't we become friends? He's like, no, that's impossible. And I said, sir, you can start by telling me your name. And I stuck out my hand to him and I said, sir, let's be friends. And as I stuck out my hand to shake his hand, he just stood there and he froze. And after a few minutes, he started to shake. And then all of a sudden, I saw his hand creep towards mine and he shook my hand. And as he's shaking my hand, I saw these tears start to roll down his face. And for about 10 minutes, he just shook my hand and tears streaming down his face. And he finally looks at me and he says this. He's like, Dan, and he calls me by my name. My name is Razak, and I would love to be your friend. And it caused me to see that there is no heart too hard for Jesus. That he can change the hardest heart. God taught me to love my enemy. I heard these guards talking about the foreigners, me and my friend. They're Christians, they follow Jesus. And then another one was said, oh, these foreigners, they knew they could have problems when they came here, but they have purpose. They've got a reason to live and a reason to die. And that's what I want. And I heard 3 of these men say, yeah, today we are gonna follow Jesus. We are gonna follow the way. And if that was part of the reason why God allowed me down there, yeah, so be it. I found out indirectly that I was under 2 death sentences, one for being a missionary, one for being a spy. And again, in that prison, I heard executions, yeah, quite regularly. It was my moment in a courtroom. I stood on the stand, hundreds of people in the room, video cameras, judges, and then came the question. Tell us today, sir, why? Why did you come to Iran? Something rose up within me. And I remember looking at the judge and saying this. I came to Iran to tell you about Jesus Christ. And when I said that, I'm like, oh, what did I say? And all of a sudden, I said it again. And then I said it again. And then something started to grow in my heart. And for about 20 minutes, I just preached the gospel. And I told everyone in that courtroom, and I told everyone who could hear me, all about who Jesus is, all about how much he loved them. All of a sudden, I realized something. I am free. In the midst of death itself, God gave me the grace to stand up and speak the truth. And in doing so, it brought freedom in my heart, knowing that this life isn't it. There is more. And I'm going home one day, and no one can take that away.
I remember growing up, I felt a great sense of emptiness, a void in my life. I needed something to identify with. I needed something to give me a sense of worth, a sense of respect. I didn't know what it was that I was involved in. I had no idea. One night, it all came together. Unbelievably just so broken at that point. Allah, if you're God, answer me today. Give me an answer to my insecurity. Give me an answer to this pain that I feel in my life. And I looked down at my Quran and all I could see was big, empty book. I really got that sense that it was empty. It was totally empty. I heard a voice in my mind, in my being, and it said, "What about your Bible?" And the minute I opened up the Bible, my eyes just started to weep, and I looked down at the page, and it was as if the words on the page had life, and it was breathing with me. Every breath I took, the page just sort of came with me, and the words went up and down, and the words on the page just stood out, and it was amazing. It said, "My word is the living word." More and more.
Amir asked God to forgive him for all the terrible things he had done. But changing his entire life didn't happen overnight. He was in a gang, using drugs, and still learning about his new faith. But something was new. For the first time, he had hope. He speaks in schools about his experience, using some shocking show and tell that is all too familiar from his past life. And just in case kids missed his point, he brings a real-life example of the price gang life can exact. Amir Javid knows he could have been under one of those tarps and credits the intervention of God for changing his course.
That was a boy. The Amir who's a man today, who has a wife, who has a son, who looks at this city and thinks about the pain and the suffering that's going on, and who's just overwhelmed by a desire to want to change these kids' lives.
The draw and the pull from my sin and the worldliness was stronger than my will to turn my life over to the Lord. So I did reject him. And I went to Iraq and almost got killed twice. You know, somebody gave me a word of knowledge when I got home and said that you were supposed to die twice in Iraq, but the Lord intervened. So I rejected him, but he gave me another opportunity. So, have you rejected him? Have you fully given yourself over to him? Have you fully submitted to his will and said, all right, you know I got these things that I'm holding on to. There's still like this worldliness that I enjoy and I can't conquer it. You know, I believe in you. But instead of just me believing in who you are, why don't you come dwell in me? Come dwell in this temple. Come be the Lord of my life. You don't know Jesus until you know Jesus. You know, there's a belief, you know, I believed in the bar when I was throwing them back. I believed in Jesus. But you need to know Jesus. You need to just let him come in. And let him live through you. And let him be the Lord of your life.
I came for you. I came for your sin. I came for your pain. I came for your not having security in your life. I never had security in my life. I had lots of money. I had a lot of things around me, but never had security. But he says, I came for you. I came to remove it. Because we always believed in a sacrifice of lamb. We, as a Muslim, we usually do that. It came from Abraham. And we used to do it. Whenever we commit sin, our parents cut the lamb for us as a sacrifice. Jesus says, I am the lamb. I'm your Father, God, who came as a human being. I called myself Son of God. Kamil understands Son of God means God in the flesh and bone. As a human being, I came for you. I care for you so much. I came, and that's what he did. Just not because of religion, because of relation with our Father in heaven, who is one God and is only one God. I know so many people are watching this right now. And they're thinking, what happened to this man? I found our God, our one God, God Vahed, the God who loves us so much, that he shared his love to us in form of a human being. He shed his blood for us. He went on the cross for me and you.
There's nothing that you're doing that Jesus won't say, come to me today. I'll clean you up. Today is the day of salvation. You know, don't put it off. I tried to put it off. I put it off for years. And it's only by the mercy and grace of God that I had an opportunity to still accept the offer, because I rejected the Lord. Whatever you're holding on to, let it go. Jesus is like, you know, the garbage man. He comes by, he picks up all your junk, and he takes it away. You know, all your spiritual baggage, all your emotional baggage, all your sin, all your failures. You know, just everything that the world has put on you to just kick you around and just beat you down. Jesus wants to take that away. Humble yourself and ask him to take it. You have to willingly give it up. You know, if you're like, no, I got this, I'm holding on to this one, you know, I can handle this, I don't need you.
With the Lord, a day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are as a day. Well, you might be thinking, what's the big deal? Why is that verse so key? That the Lord looks as each day as 1,000 years. It's like divine geometry. And friends, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out the formula here. Each day is chock full of opportunities to invest in 1,000 years worth of eternity. And just to make certain that we have something in which to invest, God puts around us people. The way we spend our hours and minutes with them counts, and it counts for all of eternity, not only in your life, but in their lives. Kim was really grasped by this idea that one day could kind of like exponentially pan out to 1,000 years worth of treasures laid up in heaven. But she said, Johnny, I'm bedridden. I'm paralyzed. I can't do anything. Oh, Kim, take your focus off yourself just for a moment and put it on your mom. Do something to lighten her load, brighten her heart, make more delightful her step. You should know that she passed away a month and a half after we talked. But oh, those were some of the best days that girl ever lived.